Hello and welcome to the RotoWire WNBA show, where we talk about fantasy basketball. I'm Jason Shebilske alongside Kirien Sprecher. Today, we'll discuss the first weekend of action around the WNBA. We'll give some of our top waiver pickups of the week, and finally, we'll preview the week of action ahead. Those looking to subscribe to RotoWire can use the promo code ROTO15 at checkout for 15% off any RotoWire product. RotoWire has plenty of useful tools available now that the WNBA season is underway, including stats, DFS advice, and betting picks. It's a great resource to keep up with the league, and the promo code ROTO15 will get you the best deal all season long. During today's show, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments and we'll get them answered. If you ask live, we'll get them answered on the show, but we'll also be active in the comments afterward to provide any additional insight. Additionally, on social media, you can find me at Jason Shebilske, Kirien at Kirien Sprecher RW. We're happy to answer any questions that come up on social media, and especially as the season gets underway. It was an entertaining first weekend of games around the WNBA, and there were several surprises that stood out to me. First, the Mystics are 2-0. Granted, their wins came over Atlanta, who is a borderline contending team, and the Sun, who are expected to be one of the worst teams in the year, but certainly an encouraging start for the Mystics.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into this weekend, it was like Paige Beckers, Dominique Malonga. Like, how are these rookies going to, perform after Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese took the league by storm last year? But it was a different pair of rookies, and both of these rookies played on the same team. Sonia Citrone and Kiki Iriafen absolutely were fantastic for Washington this weekend. Yes, you mentioned, maybe they weren't playing the top tier teams in the WNBA, but Washington looked really connected and they played really well. And these two rookies were played well beyond what expectations for a rookie. And given how well they started, you would be shocked if their roles deteriorated here. Obviously, we got to mention Shakira Austin missed the first game, and then she came back to play the second game, and then got ejected. So there was a lot of minutes still available, and then Aaliyah Edwards is still going to be on the sideline for a couple of weeks. So maybe the Citrone and Iriafen's roles change when those players come back. But and Austin will be back next game. She's healthy now. The ejection is just a one-off thing, but great weekend for the rookies. And then you also got to give a shout out to Brittany Sykes, who was just like a fantastic veteran stabilizer. Like, she stabilized and let the rookies, not have to do too much or play out of their minds. And just a really great weekend for the Mystics all around.
Yeah, and even though I mentioned their opponents, we should know, as we do every year, there is no easy game in the WNBA. Even if you're playing Connecticut or Golden State this year, who are expected to be some of the lower teams in the league, you're still you're still dealing with a league of just 156 players. So to be in the WNBA and to be on a WNBA roster, you have to have some incredible talent. And every team has those players who are capable of going off every night. There aren't really teams that are looking to like tank in any given season. And going into the season, once Georgia Amore suffered her injury, you could kind of see the writing on the wall that Sonia Citron might have some sort of role for the Mystics, but she looked dominant in her first two games. And Kiki Iriafen, Aaliyah Edwards is now going to miss multiple weeks. It sounds like she'll probably be out for at least the first 2 weeks of the regular season. So it was somewhat predictable to see her step up, but even when the Mystics had Shakira Austin back in game two, uh, you mentioned that Austin got ejected, but just overall, she didn't have the biggest role overall. 7 minutes.
And Austin came off the bench. She
Yep.
came off the bench. Iriafen still started. And like we talked about Austin's injury history, it wouldn't be surprising if they kept her in that 6-player role just to watch her minutes closely.
Yeah, and did Jaden Melbourne continue to start? I'm drawing a blank right
No,
now. Okay. Yeah, so okay, it looks like Shug Sutton
yeah,
remained in the lineup alongside Citron, Iriafen, and Dolson. But yeah, even if Iriafen comes off the bench going forward, I think that both players will be able to have a role, and Shakira Austin will only boost this lineup going forward. So it was encouraging for fantasy purposes to see Shakira Austin be cleared to play so early. it wouldn't be surprising, kind of like in past seasons, where if the Mystics just kind of limit her playing time early on and just make sure that she's healthy for the entire season or as much of it as she can be. But certainly, if you're a Mystics fan, you have to be encouraged by the first two games.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to put a bow on the Mystics conversation is Citrone 12 free throw attempts in her first two games. Like that for a rookie, getting to the free throw line and being aggressive and playing through that contact, that's something that stands out more than, 15 points in her first two games. Getting to the free throw line, making shots from deep. And then Iriafen, just the rebounding prowess, 14 rebounds in that last game. So, those are like more of like things that I'm focused on that seem like these performances can be, can go on for weeks to come and not just kind of like a one weekend write off.
Absolutely. And with Iriafen's performance yesterday, they were going up against the Sun, who, as much as we are down on the Sun this year, just because they lost a lot of pieces, they aren't expected to do a lot. They added Tina Charles, who is one of the best front court players in the history of the league, really. So to see Iriafen be able to pick up 14 rebounds going up against someone like Tina Charles is really impressive to see, especially in just your second professional game. This was less surprising, but the Lynx looked like a well-oiled machine right out of the gate. Dallas kept up with them for most of the first half on opening night, but the Lynx pulled away from the Sparks on Sunday night pretty easily. The Sparks also kept things close for a while, but the second half was kind of a double-digit game for a lot of it. Nafisa Collier certainly looks like an MVP favorite, but Caitlin Clark was also stellar against the Sky on Saturday, putting up a triple-double. So I think that both players, and Brianna Stewart and jaWilson, really what we're saying, the top of the league, there's no shortage of talent and there was no shortage of production this weekend.
Yeah, the top teams acted like the top teams as they should, and I'm feeling after one weekend, I'm still feeling pretty confident about my Lynx Fevers finals prediction. Clark and the New Look Fever are going to be trouble, right? DeWanna Bonner, I think she scored 7 points in the season opener. She's probably going to have a lot higher scoring performances, but just the fact that she scored 7 points and moved into third place on the all-time scoring list. So this Fever team has the player that scored the third most points in league history, and like on any given night, she could be like a fourth option for this Fever team. And their number one option is probably going to be a player that might surpass DeWanna Bonner in a decade from now. So this Fever team is. They were really good, and they were like the story of the weekend. You mentioned the Lynx, that they had a slower start in that first half against Dallas, but then turned it around. And then I also want to give a shout out to Natasha Cloud for the Liberty making her debut. I talked about Courtney Vandersloot, and I love Courtney Vandersloot. I'm a Sky fan. She has been a huge contributor in a lot of big games for the Sky. She is a great player, one of the league's best point guards ever. But at this stage of her career, you could tell when they got into those postseason series against, the Aces and the Lynx, Courtney Vandersloot just couldn't hold up defensively. And Natasha Cloud she's just a different player. She's more tenacious getting to the rack. Her athleticism brings a new element to this Liberty team, and that was on full display. She was the big reason why the Liberty blew the Aces out. Obviously, Brianna Stewart, obviously I'm an idiot. Like I said, Brianna Stewart's going to have these games where she scores 30, but I just don't my reasoning for not taking her third and taking her fifth overall was that those 30-point games might not be every night. And then also John Claude Jones had another double-double. Like we said, these top four teams, Lynx, Fever, Liberty, Aces, they're going to be, they've already set the standard, right? They set the standard this weekend for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think that Saturday's game was just indicative of what we've been saying all off season. Is the Liberty had a double-digit win over the Aces, who, even if they do take a slight step back this year, the Aces aren't going to be any sort of pushover. And they did it while Sabrina Ionescu put up 8 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. It was thoroughly underwhelming stat line from Ionescu, who shot 25% from the floor. So I think that the production will be there later on in the season. It was just a cold night to begin the season. It was her first game, I think, in the last like 68 games where she didn't have at least one 3-point made. So
bet
just
her to make a 3-pointer next game
right.
because that's not going to happen twice.
Yeah, just a really uncharacteristic performance from her, but the rest of the team really stepped up and was able to put the team on their back. So I think that there'll be a lot of players who are capable of contributing to the Liberty, as we've been saying all off season.
And I guess, we should probably I said the top 4 teams. The Aces did not play well. They got blown out. It could have been a lot worse, honestly. jaWilson was fantastic. Basically, everyone else struggled offensively. But we also, you got to give credit. They were playing the Liberty with Natasha Clouden, with Leonie Phoebish. Like, this is a really good defensive Liberty team. So the Aces didn't have a great performance, but I'm not going to drop them out of that tier 1 list. And because they lost to the Liberty, who are the defending champs, right? That they just had a tough game. The Liberty got their rings before the game, right? Their championship ring. So there was just a little bit of extra energy for the Liberty in this one. I think the Aces will be fine. I think Jackie Young is going to be the player that has to step up. Without Kelsey Plum now, Jackie Young's role is going to have to get bigger. And, Chelsea Gray's, she picks and chooses her moment, but Jackie Young needs to step up for the Aces, I think.
Absolutely. One of the things to keep in mind just in all of sports is to not overreact after the first game or two of a regular season, similar to how you maybe shouldn't be going to place futures bets on the Mystics to win the championship. You shouldn't be writing off the Aces after just one game. So there's a lot of basketball left to be played, and a lot can happen throughout the entire season. And even though this weekend had a lot of really fun action to watch, we also received some discouraging injury news over the weekend as Kalia Copper, Aaliyah Edwards, Natasha Mack, and Ray Burrell all seem to be facing multi-week absences. Catherine Westbeld and Monique Akoa Makani drew starts in the Mercury's regular season opener. Westbeld was decently productive, but Alexa Held had better results off the bench than Akoa Makani. And in Washington, the team's rookies, as we mentioned, Sonia Citron and Kiki Iriafen, stepped up for the Mystics, while Jade Melbourne and Shug Sutton were also productive. So I think that there are a lot of players who are sort of off the fantasy radar heading into the season who will be able to step up and provide you with a boost early in the season, even if you drafted one of those players who are facing early absences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just, going off the list of names that you mentioned, Citron and Iriafen are probably at long-term ads for me at this point. They're rookies. The Mystics, they're going to have minutes available for these two long-term. And then Westbeld, Akoa Makani, and Held. You can even throw Jade Melbourne and Sug Sutton in there. I think those 5 players, those are streaming candidates for me. If you have a spot available, if you have a player, a spot on your roster that you're willing to stream, those 5 players, you can stream them. I wouldn't be adding them and expecting them, to fill in for the multiple weeks that Aaliyah Edwards or Clea Copper's out, right? But those, Westbeld, Akoa Makani, Held, Melbourne, and Sutton, those are good streaming candidates where you put them in. Hopefully you get 15 points, maybe you get 20, maybe you get 8, but at least you got 8, and that's better than 0, right?
Right. And I just checked on ESPN, Citron is rostered in 86% of leagues. Iriafen is rostered in 65%. So most likely they're already on a roster in your league, but especially with a player like Iriafen, if she's available, pick her up and just ride the wave for as long as it continues. Maybe at some point the Mystics change up their rotation a little bit, but it's clear that it's working for them early in the season.
For sure.
We spent some time talking about how some of the stars of the league showed out this weekend, but who are some underrated players who you think are worth adding in fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about a handful of streaming candidates and 2 players that are long-term ads. Another long-term ad for me is Tahini Paopao. I think that's how you correctly say her name. I was listening to the broadcast, and that's how they say her name. But she started in her WNBA debut. We got to mention Jordan Canada is out with a knee injury, probably going to be out for multiple weeks. But Paopao submitted an all-around performance in 25 minutes. It was a narrow disappointing loss for Atlanta. We mentioned that against the Mystics. So they may opt to switch things up moving forward. But I thought Pau Pau was great and could have a solid role until Canada returns. And like I was mentioning with Citrone and her ability to get the free throw line and Iriafen's rebounding, Pau Pau's like ability to stuff the stat sheet. She made a three. She got some steals. She got some assists. She got some rebounds. That's the quality production that is sustainable to me in the long term for fantasy.
Yeah, and heading into the season, it had looked like Shatori Walker-Kimbrough might
True.
take on a starting role because she came into the game after Jordan Canada got hurt during the preseason, and she seemed to see most of the run. But Tahina Pau Pau has certainly earned her starting job. She was the number 18 overall pick in this year's draft, so she was mid-second rounder, but the talent was there at South Carolina that if the dream feel as though she's ready to go, I could see her really making an impact early on, especially if Canada does wind up missing more than 2 weeks. We talked off air about Carl Smesko and how he's a new head coach coming over from the collegiate ranks. He was at FGCU for several years and had a lot of success there. But I think that he's someone who will really have an opportunity to connect with a young player like Pau Pau. And I think that as long as the Dream continue to have an like a hole in their backcourt, I think that Pau Pau is a candidate to continue stepping up.
Yeah, and I thought Walker-Kimbrough was going to start too. You know, she's the veteran, better defender, right? And then you look at this offense and Alicia Gray or Ryan Howard, Brittany Griner, Brianna Jones. Like this is a good offensive team. So I just figured, start the veteran defensive presence. So I was very shocked that Pau Pau got the start. But she looked the part of a quality point guard in the WNBA. So obviously a lot of ball to be played. But with Canada out, I don't see why Pau Pau's minutes will go down anytime soon.
Absolutely. And after missing all of last season due to injuries, Jessica Shepard reminded us this weekend of why she's so important to the Lynx. Heading into the year, when the Lynx had Nafisa Collier, Bridget Carlton, Dorka Juhas, and Jessica Shepard all available, it looked like Shepard might kind of get pushed out of the rotation if Dorka Juhas continued to take another step. But now that Juhas is sitting out the season due to rest purposes, I think that Collier, Shepard, and Carlton will all be able to coexist in the front court alongside Alana Smith. So Shepard started in the regular season opener and played 29 minutes, and she shifted to the bench Sunday since Smith was available. But she responded by playing 30 minutes in that game, and she recorded a double-double, and that's Shepard and not Smith. Smith did have a minutes restriction Sunday, so it's worth noting that Shepard's role could decrease slightly as the season progresses. But even if Shepard continues to come off the bench, the usage for a fantasy relevant role should be there on a team that is expected to be in contention all season.
Yeah, and I don't know if Shepard will play, 30 plus minutes. In her season debut, Alana Smith played only 17, right? So, but those minutes were at the detriment of Diamond Miller and Alyssa Pili, who, Alyssa Pili played 11 minutes in the season opener, didn't play at all in game 2. Diamond Miller played 20 minutes in the season opener, played only 6 minutes. So I think while Alana Smith's minutes, get up to the 25, 28 minute range, Shepard goes back down to that 25-minute mark, or so, but that's still plenty of production. I don't see her, Jessica Shepard, dropping below 20 minutes anytime soon. And the production has been absolutely there. Someone in a league that I was in dropped Jessica Shepard after the news that Alana Smith was cleared, which, was a fine move at the moment. It's a shallow league. So at the moment I wasn't second guessing it. And then you see Jessica Shepard's performance in that game and you're like, oh, well, maybe that was a little, dumb in hindsight, but those are the types of things, she played more minutes off the bench than she did as a starter. Those things just aren't projectable or predictable. And I don't expect that trend to continue. But I do expect Jessica Shepard to be a quality fantasy player, for the next, for at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think that like you mentioned, the Lynx are still testing some things out with their rotation. So I think that Diamond Miller and Alyssa Pili are perfect representatives of that, where both of them were really productive in college. Both of them were high draft picks in the first round. But Diamond Miller, she had 21 ESPN fantasy points on opening night, and then was held to just 2 in the second game. And you mentioned that Peely played uh, a considerable amount of minutes on opening night and didn't play at all on night 2. So I think that there will be a lot of players who are shuffled around the rotation, but Jessica Shepard probably isn't going to be one of them. Even once Smith is able to handle a full workload, I think that Jessica Shepard will be one of their first options available, at least in the front court. We saw a lot of Natisha Heidemann as well this weekend. She would come in to give Courtney Williams a rest. So I think that Heidemann will be the top option in the backcourt, and then in the front court, Jessica Shepard will absolutely be one of the top options.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a player that's averaged 26 minutes per game in each of the last 2 seasons. So she is a strong member of a very good front court. Obviously, she missed time last year due to injury, which is why her value was lowered at the beginning of this season. But it looks like she's back at the peak of her powers and is ready to go on. Another front court player worth adding is Olivia Nelson-Ododa. She's Unlike Shepard, Ododa has never averaged over 15 minutes per game in each of her first 3 seasons, and she averaged a career low 12 minutes per game last year, which was her second season in Connecticut. However, the new look Sun, which most of the time I say new look, it means that they made a bunch of additions and it's a new outlook and a bright future. This is the opposite of that. It's a new look Sun that's probably not going to be very good. But they're going to need production wherever they can get it. Rookie Anise Morrow is out with a knee injury, and Nelson Ododa has stepped up and is playing really well. Morrow missed the entire preseason too, so that's obviously something that suggests that she's not returning right around the corner anytime soon. And as long as she's out, Nelson Ododa has a clear shot to consistent fantasy points. And like we mentioned, got to prioritize those forwards. And I think Ododa is one of those. Nelson Ododa, Jessica Shepard, those are those early season front court options that are going to make a big impact.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the preseason that Anissa Morrow was a rookie of the year candidate for me. She spent the start of her college career at DePaul, so I did watch her in person in a couple of games just across the city, living in Chicago, and she was dominant in college, whether she was at DePaul or LSU. But if she's dealing with an injury early in the season that will ultimately force her to miss time, which it's forced her to miss 1 game, I'm probably taking her off of my rookie of the year train. But I think that Olivia Nelson-Ododa is someone who, kind of like we talked about with Jessica Shepard, while Morrow is sidelined, Nelson Ododa should continue to have a dominant role. But even once Morrow is back and healthy, I think that the ingredients are there for Nelson Ododa to potentially maintain a starting role and to continue to have decent run that at least makes her worth keeping near the end of your bench. She's someone that if you drop in your fantasy league to pick up a streamer, I don't think that people are going to rush to the waiver wire to get her, but she can certainly provide value when she's on the court. And then we had mentioned Washington a little bit earlier, but just to get a little bit more in depth, Shug Sutton is a player who should be able to see ample playing time this year because Georgia Amore will miss the season due to an ACL injury. Now with Sutton, I think that in order to provide fantasy value, I think that her shot will need to fall on any given night since she doesn't provide very much value outside of the scoring column. But she's at least a player available in nearly all leagues who should be a decent streaming option. She's available right now in just 8%. Well, she's rostered right now in just 8% of ESPN fantasy leagues, and that's risen 7% over the last week. So Sutton is available in most places and can get you some value, especially if you're in a deep 10-team league. I think that she's an option that you can keep on your bench for most of the season. And then also in Washington as a starter is Jade Melbourne. She posted over 20 ESPN fantasy points in each of the Mystics' first 2 games and seems like an intriguing player while Aaliyah Edwards is sidelined. I think that at least one of them will probably wind up being more of a streaming, just early season option because once Aaliyah Edwards is back fully healthy, I think that she'll command a pretty healthy workload. But Melbourne and Sutton are at least worth considering early in the season.
Yeah, I think worth considering as streamers for sure. Melbourne's scoring production has been nice. I I'm not they're the both of them are guards, right? So there's just a lot of guards that are available to stream on any weekly basis. JC Sheldon was available in a lot of my leagues. So it's just that's the only thing. It's just like I'm prioritizing adding these forwards early in the season that I could keep on my roster for a while, as opposed to just trying to shuffle guards in and out. But I do think that if you went, forward in your draft or something and you have your forwards locked up, shuffling guards is a great way to, get ample production, or not ample production, but like the most production possible by getting as many players in your starting lineup each day as possible.
Yeah, and so I think that Sutton, Melbourne, and Nelson Adota are more of those players who are available in like most leagues that you're in. Even if you're in a 10-team league, they might still be available on the waiver wire. And a lot of the other options that we mentioned are more just like if you're in a 6-team or 8-team league, they might be available, but otherwise deeper formats are probably already rostered. And I just want to mention before we move on, but Temi Fagbenley from the Valkyries were pretty tough to project heading into the regular season, as we mentioned in some of our preseason shows. But she put up 30 ESPN fantasy points on opening night. She unsurprisingly had a starting role. One of the things that I'm most nervous about with Fagbenley is just her availability. She has a limited track record in the WNBA. She played in 2017 through 2019 with the Lynx and played in 2024 with the Fever. Last year, even though she had a bigger role than expected because Nalissa Smith didn't really play a lot under Christy Sides last year, Fagbenley missed 18 games. So I think that there's a chance that because of her physical play style that she winds up missing some time as the season progresses. But while she's healthy, I think that Fagbenley is certainly worth rostering. And she's rostered in just 40% of ESPN fantasy leagues right now. So if she's out there, she's certainly worth considering. And then as we enter the first full week of WNBA action, there's a backloaded schedule featuring 3 games Wednesday, 2 games Thursday, and 4 games Friday. So, Kieran, as we enter the first full week, what are some of the top matchups that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, first of all, just starting with tonight, I hope Dominique Malonga plays more than 10 minutes. I'm still kind of flabbergasted at that decision making. I don't think the Storm are contenders. We talked about that on the Friday show. If you want my hot takes on who's going to make the playoffs and who's not. So like I don't understand why developmental minutes aren't like a thing right away for this team and for Malonga. Maybe that'll happen soon. But we'll see how that works out tonight. But yeah, that was one of my most frustrating thing of the opening weekend was Malonga just not playing at all. And then looking forward, I'm looking forward to Angel Reese in the sky getting a bounce back effort against the Liberty on Thursday. Like I said, the Liberty had a little bit of extra juice going into that Aces matchup. Now you play the Sky, who had a letdown against the Fever. Kind of two different mindsets going into this one. And I expect the Sky to be improved this year. And if that's going to be the case, they're going to have to put up a better effort on Thursday against the Liberty.
Yeah, and I agree with you that I think the Sky will be improved this season. I think Thursday will be a tough time to bounce back. Even with it being the home opener, there should be a lot of energy at Wintrust Arena. But their early season schedule is a pretty hefty gauntlet. After losing to the Fever on Saturday, they play the Liberty Thursday. They play the Sparks Sunday, which feels like a winnable option for them. But then they have the Mercury back-to-back games against the Wings, and then the Fever and Liberty again. So there won't be much of an opportunity for them to like really get their feet under them and get like some early season wins against like some of the like lesser opponents in the league. But I think that like they could like they have the talent to make an impact in at least one of those games against contenders early on.
Yeah, and like you said, tough schedule. I don't expect them necessarily to win on Thursday. They got to put up a much better effort, look more connected than they did against the Fever, because they look like a team that is going to finish in that bottom four. And I don't expect that to be the team that we see all season long.
For sure. And then you also mentioned Seattle. Both of Seattle's matchups this week, which are tonight against the Wings and Friday against the Mercury, are pretty intriguing to me. Like you said, the Storm didn't look good against the Mercury on Saturday. They still have the talent on the roster to make a splash this season, or at least like make a push for the playoffs. But I think that Monday's matchup will provide a good gauge of where they stand as a team. The Wings also like showed some encouraging signs in the first half against the Lynx, but then they struggled later on. So I think that seeing how the two teams match up against each other will provide a good gauge for the rest of the season. And Friday will also give the Storm an opportunity to bounce back in an early season rematch because they they were not really in that game against the Mercury a lot this past weekend. So we'll see if they can keep up a little bit better this coming Friday.
Yeah, and like I said, I have the Dallas Wings winning tonight outright. They're 3-point underdogs at the moment. I'm not a fan of Seattle this season, if you couldn't tell already. But yeah, obviously it's a good litmus test for Seattle. They should beat this Wings team. Like we mentioned on Friday's show, the Storm are in that middle tier with the Phoenix in terms of sports books projecting the playoffs, while the Wings are at a lower tier. I think these are all a little bit closer than what the sports books have, and I think the Wings get a big W tonight behind a better shooting performance from Marike Agumbawale than she had in the opener.
For sure. And just like the Sky, Atlanta also needs to get an early season boost, but it won't be easy for the Dream to do so this week because they have back to back games against the Fever. Their schedule gets a little bit easier in the weeks after this one, but I think that it certainly seems very possible that the Dream will start the season 0-3.
Very possible. I don't think they should have lost that game against the Mystics. They're gonna be kicking themselves over that for a while now. They just seemed like a team that, like a pickup team. They a lot of great talent, but haven't played together very often. Alicia Gray had her moments where she went off, but it wasn't like a good like team run, right? And then later in the game, they went to Brittany Griner, and Brittany Griner got a couple of easy buckets. And it just there wasn't a good flow for Atlanta. I expect that to change. These are a lot of great players. They just got to get time on the court together. Um, but and then they obviously back-to-back games against Fever. It's going to be hard to get right in those two games. So very easily Atlanta could start out 0-3, and as we get projecting a couple months from now, when we're talking about playoff seeding, let's remember that season opener for Atlanta, because if they're a couple of games out of the playoff conversation, that game is going to loom large for the entire season.
Yeah, for most of that first half, it looked as though it would be a case of like, can the Mystics keep up for the entire game?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
not only did the Mystics keep up, but they turned the game on its head in the second half, and they really went into the driver's seat where suddenly the Dream were playing catch up. And we'll see this a few times around the WNBA where a team with a lot of new talent, like Brittany Griner and Brianna Jones, are certainly veterans of the league, but just seeing them play like among a new lineup can sometimes create some growing pains. And like you said, I think that later in the season they might be kicking themselves because it seems like this was certainly a game that they could have won and probably would have won if it had been a little bit later in the season.
Yeah, and like you're saying, with the first half was just like, can the Mystics keep up? And that's kind of what I was alluding to with the pickup game, right? Where like the Alicia Gray was going off. She hit like 4 or 5 3-pointers in the first half, and you're like, oh yeah, we're going off. This team can't hang with us. Like I'm feeling it. Like whatever, but they just kept hanging around, and Atlanta hasn't developed that chemistry yet to win those types of close games, even if they were going up against a lesser opponent, we say, as they sit atop the standings in the Mystics.
Yeah, absolutely. And that does it for our Monday show. We'll be back this Friday at 1 p.m. Central to recap the week's action. Be sure to join us then. Thanks for watching.